pain that the AMC nurses are going through right now. There were so many unknowns and changing protocols from day to day and minute to minute. There wasn't always the best communication or coordination between the direct patient providers and management as well as administration. There were a lot of fear and unknowns and what kind of rights that we had regarding PPE. We are taking the right precautions. Are we giving patients the most effective treatment during this very critical time? Due to the strength of Ellis NYSNA Executive Committee and NYSNA nurses, the committee's actions and determination were able to make their voices heard and created a collaborative partnership with management. Together, the Ellis nurses created a comprehensive plan. We started treating every patient as a PUI. That's patient under investigation. So we're working them up to determine whether they had COVID or not. We instituted safer protocols right off the rip. We work like a team should. The lines of communication had immediately improved between administration and staff. Before the pandemic, we had periods where our NYSNA rep wasn't allowed in our facility. But that all changed when we realized we needed to work together to save lives. We came out of the first wave of the pandemic stronger as a union, stronger as a hospital. We just bargained an amazing contract because of the unity and our persistence. And I think because management recognized from the experience we just went through that nurses are essential. We are the backbone of healthcare. And with NYSNA behind us, we have a voice. We have support. We don't need to be afraid to speak up on behalf of ourselves and our patients. And we know, as nurses, as direct patient providers, that patients come first. Safety of the staff and patients, it's of utmost importance. And with NYSNA, you've got that voice. You've got support. You don't need to be afraid and not speak up. Thank you.
Now we'll call up another one of our nurses from Albany Medical Center, Patty.
Unfortunately, our story isn't as nice as Ellis's. Back in late January, 4 of our nurses in the bargaining unit requested a meeting with Albany Med's leadership in nursing and epidemiology because we were concerned about the preparedness for COVID. After about 15 minutes, it basically came down to that they were really not concerned about COVID at that time. They were more concerned about the flu and how the flu affects us. So our goal this time is to hopefully get our contract and hopefully gain our voice and hopefully gain the respect of hospital administration and be part of the planning just as Ellis nurses were. Hopefully the resurgence of COVID will look a lot different than the original. Thank you.
And our next speaker will be Jennifer Bayhold from Albany Medical Center.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for coming. To be honest, I'm not prepared. I was not told that I have to speak out in front of everybody. But the important thing over here today is that you have to listen to all the nurses at this point. We've been fighting all throughout this pandemic, and we're still fighting inside our hospital. We're still fighting for each other. We're still fighting importantly for our patients. We're still fighting to stand up for each other. We're still fighting together to make our voices heard. And instead of sitting with us on a table and listening to us and making sure that the management can know our strategies or any strategic plan that we have prepared to better make our work to make better in our work. Instead we get yelled at. Instead of listening to us on how we can make things like, better for everybody. Instead, you management, like, tell us that we can't do certain things. We cannot do this. This is like part of our job. The contamination, like, absolutely, like, contradicts or violates, like, our rights, to fight for our patients. This clearly, like, violates that. Something is going on inside Albany Med. Something is going on within the confines of our units, and something is going on inside the hospital. And we're still, like, in battle, like, right now. This is a big fight, but we're not backing up. We're still, like, standing together. With the support of everybody, with the support of the community. We're still, like, fighting, like, all throughout, and we're gonna win. We're gonna win. Thank
advocating to get PPE at our hospital. We were fighting to be able to wear masks to protect our patients on a regular basis. Now we're here fighting to have clean masks. These are the masks that are being given back to our staff at the hospital and expected to wear. It's not acceptable. We have fought to be involved with all of the planning since before COVID was a huge thing, and we need to be involved. We have lost nurses that have left the hospital because they haven't felt safe working here, and we clearly cannot afford to lose any more nurses. Our staffing is hurting. We have nothing being done for retention, and us not being involved with COVID is only going to add to the hemorrhaging of nurses at our hospital.
Yeah.
Just going to recognize other nurses who are here to support the RN nurses. We have the president from VNS, Tara Peak, she's here. We also have the local president from Bellevue Hospital, Jen Gunderman, she's here.
Yeah!
And now we'll bring up two of our community partners. First of all, I'd like to introduce Dr. Brenda Robinson. She is the president of the Black Nurses Association.
Right.
Thank you for having me. I stand with our patients. I stand with our courageous nurses here at Albany Med who show up every day despite what's going on. And I stand with Neisner, who is always fighting for our rights. We have an obligation to support our patients and our nurses. Albany Med has an obligation to keep patients and our nurses safe by providing PPE.
Yeah.
When nurses and other staff come to work for caring for their patients, it should not be a game of hide the medical mask. Oh, and by the way, disposable means disposable. Yes. Single use means single use. Nurses should not be forced to wear ineffective masks when dealing with viruses such as COVID-19. We all know the science. We all know in a hospital setting, a medical mask is not effective against COVID-19, and every nurse should have access to an N95.
Yeah.
Nurses should not be forced to use the same mask for more than one patient.
Yep.
It has been 9 months of this pandemic, and we really want to see the PPE that Albany Med has for our nurses.
Right.
We need to see it, because our trust is broken.
See it.
We want full transparency. N95 must be available for every nurse and other staff dealing with COVID-19 positive patients. This is just part of the obligation. And if obligation does not ring a bell for Albany Med, that is hard for me to believe, especially when I look at this empire Albany Med has built up on the backs of these great nurses, their sweat and their tears. Does not resonate for Albany Med to protect our nurses and give adequate PPE. How about responsibility? Does that work? How about accountability, Albany Med? Does that work?
Yep.
How about realizing nurses have a human right to safety and health, and that does not stop at the door of Albany Med? How about ethics? Ethics is simply doing the right thing. Just doing the right thing. Dr. King said it's always the right time to do the right thing. Albany Med, the time is now. Albany Med, the time is right now.
Thank you, Dr. Robinson. Now we'll call up Reverend Peter Cook, President, Executive Director, of New York State Churches Council.
My name's Peter Cook. I'm the Executive Director of the New York State Council Churches, which is based in Albany, but represents 7,000 congregations across the state of New York. You know, about 2 years ago, the nurses of, 2.5 years ago, the nurses of Albany Medical Center voted to form a union. This is not unusual since the nurses at Bellevue and Ellis also formed unions. What is unusual is that while the nurses at Bellevue have negotiated good contracts with their hospitals and have shared in COVID prevention in a more positive way, the nurses of Albany Medical Center are still waiting on a contract and waiting on being treated more justly. Last December, 10 months ago, many of us stood with these nurses to call on the administration of Albany Medical Center to negotiate a contract. At the time, the Times Union quoted me, Peter Cook, as saying, quote, "It's disturbing to us that our nurses are being treated so shabbily. They have a right to negotiate a fair contract," unquote. You know, it's kind of interesting, but the next day I got a phone call from the president of Albany Medical Center, who was questioning how a man of the cloth could use such a harsh word, shabbily. And so I politely objected and reminded the president that union busting from a faith perspective is immoral and that the nurses needed a contract. So, you know, I've had 10 months to think about my word choice and in a whole pandemic to think about this. And if I might say, after thinking about this, let me just repeat what I said last year.
Good man, Peter. Yeah.
It's disturbing to us that our nurses are being treated so shabbily.
Good man.
And we need the administration at Albany Medical Center to sit down with the nurses to give them a contract and to engage them in COVID prevention, not through their nurse managers, but directly with the nurses.
Thanks.
In closing, I can say that as a resident of Albany and as a consumer of medical services offered by this hospital, we pay a lot of money to this hospital for the health care rendered. Between me and my insurance, most recently we paid the hospital about $10,000 for minor surgery for my wife. I really appreciate the care that was offered by the nurses of Albany Medical Center. And as a paying customer, I do expect that these professionals are treated justly. They treat this community well. They have treated my family well, and in turn they need to be treated well by Albany Medical Center with a just contract. So come on, Albany, we can't delay anymore. Let's support these nurses and demand AMC offer COVID protection and a fair contract. Thank you.
And last but not least, we'll hear from the Capital District Area Labor Federation Representative Mark Emanation.
There you go, Mark.
Good afternoon, sisters and brothers.
Good afternoon.
The fight of these nurses for themselves and everyone else that works in this hospital and everyone that goes to this hospital as a patient for safe working conditions and for safety for their patients and a place at the table for the people that are doing the most work to keep people healthy and to save people's lives. That fight is part of a fight all over the country right now of working people saying, I get up, I go to work, I shouldn't die at work.
Yeah.
Our packing house workers, our grocery workers, all sorts of workers are risking their lives because the people that run this country, the government that they work for, and the people that are running this hospital and a lot of other businesses say, your lives aren't essential. You're expendable.
Yes.
We need you to work. We make money off you, but we don't care what happens to you, and we don't care what happens to your community, your patients, or your family. And as my old friend Ernie Williams used to say, it's R-O-N-G wrong. It's wrong that this is happening. Now for me, who's a labor guy, I've been in unions most of my life. For me, I believe the best thing that we can do to win this fight for working people is have a union in every single workplace in the United States. Every workplace. Now, we have 11 counties worth of members. We have 41 different unions in our federation. We have 130,000 members, and if you add their families into it, their friends into it, and their communities that they talk to into it, that's a lot of people around here. And we have our choice of what urgent care we go to. We have our choice of what hospital we go to. And if you don't give these nurses a good contract, a real contract, what they need, we will remember that when we're making our choices. And there's a lot of people on your board of directors that represent companies. And we will remember that when we're choosing what bank we go to, when we're choosing what grocery store we go to. Give these people a fair contract. Let them fight for their patients and their families, and let them come home safe.
Good man.
Once again, we're calling out Albany Medical Center to please adopt our 5-point plan for our COVID, the next surge in COVID, which includes environmental controls that will save lives, stopping COVID from spreading outside of the hospital doors, the need for the highest standards for PPEs, and more important, listen to our nurses so they don't have burnt out, and complete transparency and collaboration when we're dealing with this pandemic on a day-to-day basis. So that's all for our press conference. Any questions? Any questions? Thank you.